All right, coming up on The Real Story,
we've got Sargis Sangari. He is our Iranian expert, and he made a prediction that the soccer World Cup mattered in terms of the ceasefire. And we're going to follow up with that because I think he was right. Our next guest, it's Lieutenant Colonel Sargis Sangari. He is a retired U.S. Army Infantry and Special Operations Forces officer with multiple combat deployments to Iraq, a diplomatic assignment in Kuwait, and several other deployments to the Middle East, Europe, Asia, and Central America. You've heard him here before. He is our local expert when it comes to what's happening in Iran, and we bring him back now because apparently his prediction has come true. If you may remember or not, but probably just a few weeks ago, he said that the ceasefire was dependent on the World Cup and what was happening there. Well, now with both USA and Iran out of that competition, guess what? Hostilities have sparked up again. I wanted him to talk about that and then go into some more detail about what he knows about what's going on the ground that we may not be aware of. Sargis, thanks so much for joining us on The Real Story.
Oh, it's good to be here.
Yeah, so let's just start with your prediction surrounding the ceasefire in the World Cup. Reiterate again where that came out of in your head.
Look, everything's tied to money. There's not one thing that is not tied to dollars, and how we try to leverage or maybe globally as far as our presence is concerned. And I think part of it was also when I was looking at the calendar, I knew that Trump was going to have a NATO summit, and there was going to be a discussion on where we're going to be with the Ukraine war. And unfortunately, I think that even though Ukraine and Russia have come to an agreement as to what they would like to see the Ukraine and Russia war, and the Europeans do not want to see the type of agreement that the Ukrainian and the Russians have come together on. With that said, given the fact that the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which China is a lead to, our near peer that was established to counter NATO, has used both the Ukraine war and also the Iraq-Israeli war for his own benefit. And given the fact that we've kind of left Ukraine in the hands of the Europeans, we are managing it as far as, just Overwatch. But until they make that settlement, I kind of had an idea that we probably would not get to a settlement on the Iran war. These two wars are tied together because of the fact that China, near peer, has a hand in both of them to counter our wants and desires globally.
Okay, so you were telling me that actually there was a strategic strike by the U.S. into an area very close to Turkmenistan, and that was like a railhead related to Iranian shipments or Russian shipments to Iranian of weapons.
Yeah, I mean, China was using that railhead, and also at the same time Russia. And frankly, the blockade that's going to be on again, people say, well, we're blockading Iran. No, we're blockading China because China is the one that is the head of the snake here. Recently when the Israelis conducted operations against Hezbollah, not only did they, knock out 900 plus Hezbollah leaders, but at the same time, they had to go into the accounts that Hezbollah was running, most of them in Europe, and I hate to tell you, some of them in the Americas, and even the using cyber to go under their cryptocurrency and take away $6 billion worth of money that Hezbollah could use for his wants and desires to conduct operations against Israel. The same thing is here, where the oil that is leaving Iran is going to China directly, and as you know that. As we speak, the President of the United States is meeting with the Prime Minister of Iraq, and what is the major discussion? Iraqi oil. Why? Because Iraqi oil gives us an opportunity to leverage against not just China now, a little bit more, but at the same time gives us opportunity to maybe even push against Turkey, a rising power in the region, and possibly putting some leverage against NATO to finally come to an agreement when it comes to what the Ukrainians and the Russians have agreed upon. People, I always tell them, when you hear the word New World Order, it's not just the bad guy is trying to set up a New World Order. The current world, based on where we are, modern technologies, operates under those concepts. And now the new order is to see how we can maybe limit the connections on these type of wars to where we can achieve a peaceful world, a functional peace, hopefully in the region, not a complete peace.
Well, I know normally 110 cargo ships go through the Strait of Hormuz a day. Last I checked, it was 26 yesterday. But who's in charge? And what do they want to charge a toll to any ships that are going out to the U.S. or any other of our ally countries?
Everything's tied to the insurance. So if a cargo ship is covered by insurance, it will go through. If it wants to go under the U.S. Protection, it will go through U.S. protection. If U.S. Deems it necessary that it wants to ensure that some of those costs are recouped, it's up to them how they decide to do it under the current administration. I see that what we're trying to do now with the fact that we've had oil leave from the United States, go to Asia. It was a month ago where the first ship, docked in Texas, loaded up with oil, went through the Panama Canal, which was the first issue that President Trump addressed to counter our near peer when he took office, and landed in Japan. What happens a few months later? Japan is now, even though it's under article now, has been able to develop even strike drones, that are cardboard based to be able to counter possible aggressions from China in the South China Sea. So these are all connected together. Nothing happens in the dark. Panama was connected to Venezuela. Venezuela was connected to what we did in Iran. Iran is connected to what we're trying to do against China and Taiwan. And all those are connected together based on how our near peer China is using both the Ukraine war and the Iraq war for its own benefit. If you take one of the horses away from it, then it will be very difficult for not getting to a resolution in the other war.
Okay, so we're looking at the Ukraine-Russian war, especially in light of Lindsey Graham's death, having just come back from that war zone. And, definitely they're linked, the Ukraine-Russian war, the Iranian war. Your prediction is that the Ukraine-Russian war needs to be settled out first before you get resolution on the Iranian, any sort of a peace deal or truce?
I think the administration kind of sees it that way, too, because we kind of let Europe handle the war in Ukraine. Ukrainians and Russians have kind of come to a settlement. We may not like it, but is there a settlement? They've been bleeding out for 5 years on both sides, and both believe that they have at least a stake that what happened with all the bloodshed, that each one of them should get something out of that war. The Europeans, unfortunately, do not want to see a larger maybe a land peace for the Russians, given the fact that they don't want to see Russia be strong out of this war. I don't think any of them comes out strong out of the war. But until the Europeans are able to finally say, you know what, we're willing to support Ukraine in its wants and desire to settle with Russia, I don't think you're going to see a final end to the Iran war. I'm not saying that one cannot end before the other one, but the reality is, where it comes to China, which is driving this from both ends, I think taking away the Ukraine possibility and ending that war will really hamper China's ability to do anything as far as continuing to be the backbone for Iran. Because with the blockade and us basically now using Iraqi oil to bypass the ability of what China would be getting, it would have to force China to finally ensure its economy is not completely destroyed, to bring the Iranians to the table to have a final settlement between us and the whatever the Iranian regime is going to look like.
Okay, we only have about a minute left, but I wanted to touch on this too. There was also these rumors that the Kurdish are getting involved in hopefully fomenting regime change in Iran. What is the status of that situation? There's Kurdish bases for Kurdish opposition that attacks into Iran, but those bases are located in Iraq. And even over the past 3 days, if you notice, with all the attacks that have been taking place between the U.S. and Iran hasn't attacked Israel, but it has attacked only Kurdish positions for those oppositions in northern Iraq. And as the Prime Minister of Iraq has said, by September 30th, all the militias, to include the Peshmerga, which is a militia, which is now being paid by the Iraqi government, whether it likes it or not, have to be under the Iraqi military structure. So that should end a lot of the issues. All right, that's all we have time for. I want to thank Lieutenant Colonel Sargis Sangari, retired U.S. Army Infantry and Special Forces officer. Thank you for giving us the inside look to what's happening on the ground in Iran. We appreciate your insight, and we'll have you back again soon. Thank you.